Hi, my name is T.C. Calvert, President of Neighborhoods First Alliance and Chairman of the Fair Contracting Coalition. I went to the Million Man March because it was a day of atonement for us, a day where we atone for our shortcomings and for our sins and not being responsible in our communities. On this 25th anniversary of the Million Man March, I can see that we mobilized a lot of people here in San Antonio, Texas, to be a part of it. And I was glad to be one of the original organizers, working alongside with the Nation of Islam and different religious groups here in San Antonio. The Million Man March was a great opportunity for us to come together from throughout this United States of America and work to bring responsibility as African American men to young people and to our communities and to our churches and to our clubs and social groups and that sort of a thing. The impact it had on me is that it made me be more responsible and gave me more encouragement to do more for my community, whether it be dealing with young people, dealing with education, dealing with crime prevention, dealing with street and drainage. It just gave us the responsibility to come back home and even work harder to create a better quality of life for our neighborhoods. Being amongst a million men on the mall in Washington, D.C. is just a rush, an adrenaline rush. I tell you, it's just a feeling that you really can't describe unless you're there to be a part of it. Atonement is when you confess to your sins, things that you've done that you don't feel good about. So what it did for me, it just gave me more encouragement and gave me a sense of being and working harder for my community and atoning myself. If I said something to somebody that they didn't like, or I wronged somebody in my family or someone in the community, then you atone to it and you commit to being a better person. Well, it translates to 25 years later that we're living in a time with this coronavirus pandemic and with the racial strife that's going on and with the Black Lives Matter movement. We need a lot of atonement. You can see that coming from the White House, there's a lot of divisiveness and a lot of darkness and a lot of hatred where people are singling out people from Africa, Muslims being singled out, people from our brown brothers and sisters from Mexico being said that they're rapists. So there needs to be a lot of atonement, especially at the White House with the President of the United States. So he needs to atone himself. He needs to bring this nation together. He needs to be a healing factor. He needs to atone to his sins for dividing this nation. Well, 25 years later, my son was one of the youngest people, Brother Edwards, to go to the Million Man March. And now he's the first African American county commissioner in 177 years in Bexar County, and one of the sharpest and one of the new policymakers who's had impact on our community. So me taking him to the Million Man March shows the progress we've made. But we still have a long way to go, especially during this time with the coronavirus impacting our neighborhoods, especially impacting African Americans and Hispanics. We're hit the hardest by this coronavirus pandemic. And so it shows a disparity that we have in the healthcare industry. It shows a disparity where we don't have the insurance. It shows a disparity where we don't get the vaccinations and the kind of treatment that we deserve. We've come for 400 years since slavery. We still got a long way to go, because in our history of our nation, black people have always had to struggle, always had to fight harder, because we still have vestiges of slave mentality, even at the White House, even in Congress, and even in our government, state government and local government. And some people just can't see that. Some people don't even understand what Black Lives Matter means. If white people were being hunted down and shot down by the police, then they would probably understand why we say Black Lives Matter. And a lot of people do not understand that. That's why you have these young people on the streets. And I'm proud of them. I'm proud that they have taken the torch from us veteran civil rights people, and they're carrying the torch. You know, so we just got to make sure that 25 years from now, that we're not still working to rid our communities from the institutional racism that still exists in our society. When you say institutional racism, you're talking about banks still redlining our neighborhood. We're talking about blacks still not getting the positions at the city, county government level. We're talking about businesses that don't get contracts from local taxing entities. We're talking about, you know, job security. These are the types of things where institutional racism plays in. You know, look at what's going on right now with voting. Right before this election, and on this tape, the President of the United States is dismantling the post office so people can't vote by mail because of the pandemic. People need to be safe to vote by mail in this society. And that is a major, major issue and a major, major problem right now. People should be able to, people have been tarred, feathered, and died and murdered to have the right for blacks to have the right to vote.
One of the things I remember when I viewed the film
Yes.
was when there was a part of it where you were carrying the part of the banner and your son was on the other side carrying the banner.
Yes, sir.
And y'all began to walk.
Yes, sir.
And you can hear very clearly in the video, you asking your son, "You okay?" And that spoke to me. That spoke to me that despite the fact that y'all were at one of the most important events of a lifetime to share father and son, you still have that parental sensibility to say, "Son, you okay?"
Yeah.
And that spoke to me.
Well, you know, it's important to make sure that young people understand and know what's going on. You know, when you have 1 million man assembled like that, it's important because I'm quite sure he was overwhelmed and he didn't know that. He was excited and I was excited. You know, I asked him, was he okay? Because there's a lot of people around. And you got to make sure when you're around a lot of people, you got to watch over your back. You got to watch over your corner, you know, because anything can happen at an event like this. So that's one of the reasons I asked him, was he okay? What I'd like to say to America is this is one of the most important elections in our lifetime. More important than when we elected Obama president. Let me tell you why. Now listen to me carefully. If you will care about health care and we want to stop the spread of this coronavirus, we got to have a team in the White House that is organized, that is laser beam focused, that can come up with a virus, that can come up with a vaccine to cure this virus. That is very important in healthcare. It's very important that we have a president and a vice president who can unite this nation. This nation has been divided. This nation is experiencing a darkness. And I think that the presidential election with new leadership will shed light on our nation and will bring people together so we can have a better America. You need to vote on it if your life depends on it. You need to take your brothers, your sisters, your aunts and uncles, everybody to be a part of this election. This election cycle is one of the most important. If you're sick and tired of not having enough money in your pocket, you need to go vote. If you're sick and tired of not having proper housing in your neighborhood where you live, then you need to go vote. If you're sick and tired of not having enough quality police protection in your community, you need to go vote. If you're sick and tired of just being sick and tired, this is the time to go vote. This is not the time for people to say that their vote don't count. Let me tell you why your vote counts. Listen to me carefully, those in America that are listening to this. If your vote did not count, little junior, then why are they trying to suppress your vote? Why are they moving the mailboxes and moving mailing machines? That's because your vote is important. This is why it's important for you to go vote. Why do you think they want you to have a voter ID law? to suppress your vote. That's because your vote is so important in this particular election. Why do you think everybody wants to make sure you have shortened early voting periods? This election is really not in November. What we decided to do, this election starts in October. It actually starts October 13th. So October 13th, we all need to turn out. Don't wait till November the 3rd. You don't know what can happen. You can get sick. You cannot have a babysitter. Anything can happen. You may have to be at a wedding or a funeral or out of town. So October the 13th is the day that we need to start going to the polls to vote. And vote early. Don't wait till the day of the voting. Some of you traditionalists that like to wait till the day of voting, that's fine. But you need to go vote early because, tomorrow's not promised to us.
I'm Tommy Calvert. I'm just a young man born off of Freedom Bridge and Martin Luther King in Eastwood Village, County Commissioner, Bexar County, Precinct 4. Well, for the purpose of the march, as a young man, 15 years old rather, I wanted to go with the message of making up for any wrongdoings that males have not been a part of in our community, and trying to take a leadership role in doing right in the community. And we know that so many women had been taking up a lot of slack, 1 in 3 black men incarcerated. And so it was important as a young activist who at that time was on the speaking circuit in churches and youth groups and high schools, and going to Washington, D.C. and with my father with the National People's Action Organization, that I was part of what would be one of the most, and probably the most powerful civil rights and human rights and activist marches in the 20th century. Certainly in the late 20th century, it was the most profound, and will go down in the history books with such a strong wave that it created in a lot of communities across America and across the world. Because even the local activism, I never forgot about the international aspect of the Million Man March, because I also did work in places like Sudan freeing slaves, or Burma as the chief of external operations of the American Anti-Slavery Group. So it was about making sure that as I entered adulthood, that I was going to be a productive activist fighting for the needs of our community. It was true brotherhood. It was true love. It was true energy. There's just something incredibly special about the beautiful color of all of these shades of black men coming together in a way that we have been so downtrodden, and we've been maligned and marginalized, and our image has been vilified. And here we are together, 1 million of us, doing something positive, uplifting, taking our rightful place in leadership. And I really do think that there have been so many continual moves forward from that march for activists. It was like, we were in a desert, and we got to an oasis, a spring of refreshment. And it was powerful. It was very powerful to see a sea of black men. I remember as we tried to get there early and wade through the crowds, and as we were, making our way as close to the Capitol Hill stage and everything, just getting the shout outs about, our city, and giving the shout outs back to other cities. It was something you'll never forget. It was a great day for San Antonio. We represented. It was great to be with my dad. I mean, I've always followed in his footsteps, and he's always blazed pathways, and he's made those pathways open so that I could be where I am today. I stand on his shoulders, of course, and it was great to stand side by side. I hope one day that I can, teach my own son or daughter that it's important to stay involved in the community and to fight for the community, because right now we're in the midst of very evil things going on in the community. And I think that my father is very proud of the fights that I'm fighting today. In his, he's passed the baton on, so that he's created a Jedi of activism. I'm able to fight to make sure that we have equal voting access in our election. I'm fighting to keep people alive in the COVID epidemic, as it seems very intentional, the spread of this disease to Black and brown communities. We're fighting for economic empowerment and inclusion in so many things. And so what it was to be there at the march and to be multi-generational is very special. Very, very special. There probably aren't a whole lot of young people who wanted to be with their parents at a march like that. But we have I think a ministry, a calling as Calverts. It actually dates back to my grandmother, my father's father, who was the neighborhood evangelist, and she was the one who, when you were hungry, you went to her house and got food. If you needed marriage counseling, she would do it. If the neighborhood needed to go down to City Hall, she would help draw up the plans with Maria Berriozapple back in Beacon Hill Neighborhood Guild. And so my father was being a great teacher in showing me that we need to unite nationally, internationally, locally, and that Black men are always going to have a role in championing for our community. To make up for wrongdoing. That is what atonement means to me. And, if as a Black man we were not present in our families, then we need to make up for that. If as a Black man we hadn't done what's right by our faith, we need to ask for forgiveness for that. If we had been abusive, we needed to turn a page on that and ask for forgiveness and healing. If we had an enemy that we held a grudge against, we need to forgive and turn the page, because it's only in forgiveness that we can get the blessings from God. Because if we don't forgive ourselves and ask for forgiveness for the things that we've done to others, then that blessing cannot be given to the next person that needs that. So we always can come to the throne of grace and ask God to please forgive. And in that, there's reconciliation. There can be reconciliation for the hurt that may have happened and the harm that may have been done. And so, I ended up going and majoring in international relations with a specialty in global conflict, peace, cooperation, and justice. And reconciliation, when a wrong has been done, is central to peace. And so we know that we need peace in our communities in so many ways. People are disturbed by addiction. People are disturbed and outraged by economic segregation. People don't have peace because of violence. People don't have true peace because of environmental hazards. There's so many things that don't bring peace to us. And we have to admit wrong so we can identify where the problem is and begin to change it and make it right. That's very important. The sky is the limit for you, and that this world needs you to step up and be involved to protect and advance the things that your community needs. And there's no doubt that each and every one of us plays a special part. And I think as long as you keep that sense of faith, that you know that God has been with you from the beginning, that no matter if you're in the valley of the shadow of death, God will always be with you. And he will order your steps and order your path and help to make those valleys better and make them whole in terms of what you need. So we don't want you to be fearful. We don't ever want you to feel like you are less than. God was there for Moses and David and so many others, and he'll be there for you. And it's important to empower yourself with knowledge, education, because it is the great equalizer in terms of being ready for the battle. You've got to prepare yourself, and you have to work. You have to have a strong work ethic. But in doing those kinds of things, you can advance your family, your community, and yourself to planes and heights and places you maybe never ever dreamed.
Hi, my name is Chris Dawkins, and I attended the Million Man March, but my story is a little bit different because although most of the gentlemen that have talked before have been from San Antonio, I actually was living in Ohio at the time, actually Columbus, Ohio, and I attended the Million Man March by leaving from Columbus, Ohio. I took my son with me to the Million Man March because I thought it was very important that a young man be able to see and be exposed to blackness from a different side of what we were seeing. Yes, we were probably about 6 hours from Chicago, Illinois, where Minister Louis Farrakhan resides, but of course there are mosques all over the place. And even though we had a mosque in our city, or a temple, whatever they may call it, it still was not the same as attending with a bunch of black men from around the country. The story that I really have that was most unique to me is that when my son and I was on the bus and we stopped at a certain restaurant to be able to stretch our legs and do whatever, we're stopping at a place where there's probably 40 different buses. And all of these buses that are in this particular place are all people who are going to the Million Man March. And what was so funny is that you would see the white people who are sitting in the restaurant and they're sitting very still because they don't know if Armageddon is coming or not. But all of the black men are passing and they're very courteous. There's not much being said. We all know that we've got a purpose. They're sitting there. The white folks are sitting there, but the black men are coming using the restroom. Yeah. All respectful, nothing said, take care of your business, do what you need to do, get back on the bus. The most important thing about that is that nobody told those men to act that way. There was a certain thing about going to the Million Man March and what was expected of you and how you acted accordingly by going to that march. Your whole mentality changed by just going to the march. So what it says to me even today is that if given the proper circumstances, black folks do know how to act. When we talk about, act a certain way or whatever, but if you are given the opportunity, if black folks are given the opportunity, they will act accordingly to how people expect them to act. When you expect differently, and when you allow folks to really expand their minds, they will do and act differently. And that's what the Million Man March really did for myself, it did for my son, and all of those people who attended. Those people who did not attend the Million Man March, no matter where you were from, were on the wrong side of history.
Amen. That's great.
First of all, anything that you want to do deserves to be researched, and that includes being black. We've got to understand where we come from and where we're going. If you allow other people to determine who you are and who you're going to be and how you're going to act, then that's how you will act. But if you begin to take and look at your sense of purpose from a perspective of finding out who you are, how you got here, and different things like that, I think it will change the person who you are. Because right now we live in an America where I really hate to bring this out, but it is very true, where the Jewish community is trying to tell our black people who we are and who we're not. And if you're a friend of Minister Farrakhan, you can't be a friend of white folks or be a friend of Jewish. And I don't necessarily believe that. What I do believe is that you should be able to pick who your friends and people are that you associate with. We've got a man in the black community, in the Minister Louis Farrakhan, who has taken people who are in jail, who've been incarcerated, who America has thrown away, and when they get out say that they can't vote. But that minister has taken those people, and I see people here in San Antonio right now who have businesses. And the businesses that they are contributing to society. But if you would have the greater good that you would see and believe all the hype that you hear, then America is trying to separate you from those people. And I don't think that that's correct. We have to determine who our people are, the people who we decide to listen to, and that's an individual choice. My message to America would be this. We live in a different time right now. There's a number of things that have happened in America just recently. We're dealing with a pandemic. You've had the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, and America has been affected in very, very many different ways. And I really feel that those ways are for the good. At least I hope that they will be. America seems to be looking at blackness now in a different realm. I see white people marching with black people, and those white people are mainly younger folks who are saying, we've had enough of this. We visited this many times, and we hope that we can get this right this time, because our parents didn't. We're trying to really come together as a group. No, I'm not naive enough to believe that racism is going to be erased, or that we'll snap our fingers and things will change. But I do believe that we're making a start today that we have never made before. And I think that we've got people on our side that hopefully will want to join together to make America better. We also, I must say, we have an element in America that is also does not want to see this happen. And we've got to take that element out of America. We've got a president now that does not seem to be embracing what the rest of America is embracing. And as I talked about the Million Man March, I think this president is on the wrong side of history. But it has been good for America, or it's been good for black folks especially, to be able to see that we have not ridded ourselves of the prejudice that has happened and been in America for 400 years, because we're being able to see that right now. But if we don't want the next 400 years to be like the last 400 years, then we must change.
My name is Frank Dunn. I'm from Denver Heights, Texas. I was part of the Million Man March. As we know it, one of our facilitators from the Denver Heights, his name was Charles Shannon, contacted us when this first broke, and we put a group of people together to go and invest into what we know is good for black men. Atonement in some ways, and different views of atonement. What are you really atoning for? So saying that, we had several meetings, and the group grew bigger and bigger, and we finally almost chartered a whole plane. So I think we took over 30 people on one plane to go to this event. Because we were getting negative feedback, because they felt like the Christians at that time felt like it was a thing for, you guys are going to follow a Muslim. But then our mind was, this is bigger than any one religion. This is a true event for black men. So saying that, we involved other people into this. So one of the things that I caught in the very beginning of this was because now you have all of these really serious black men from San Antonio which we've always known this. This city, although our percentage is a smaller percentage of black folks, but this city has impacted the whole world, not only the United States. So when we left from the airport, a guy sitting next to me on a plane, a white lawyer, and he asked me, he said, "Where are you guys going? You know, too many of you black guys on the plane already, but where are you going?" I said, "Well, we're going to the Million Man March." And he said, "You guys are following Farrakhan?" I said, "No, we're following ourselves. Plus, this is bigger than any one person." Saying that, when we got there, when we got to the airport, we already seen all of these other black men coming off of these planes. That was the most unbelievable sight. That grabbed me immediately when I got there. Charles Shannon facilitated a lot of this stuff, as I said, but he had everything set for us on how we moved and where we went. When we got to the hotel, the whole our lobby was filled with black men. And we started talking to each other. We hadn't even unloaded our clothes yet. When we went to the rooms, came back, and we all met that evening, just sit down and talk to each other, how we could enhance what we did from each city to make ourselves better people. Well, I think Atonement, in my look on Atonement, it's several different deals. It's what atones, what make you a better person. And my whole thought was, because I've always been in some kind of youth involved programs. You know, I have a business, and God has blessed me with that, so I can get in the community and do things that I wanted to do. I strongly felt like we needed to do more community involvement, mentorship in these type of programs before we even went to this. So we already was kind of touching around on that. And as we went, and then in the end, it was more to that. So I think it's an individual deal. Your atonement has to be what's good for you. Is it being a stronger man in your family? Or is it representing, which is one of my pet peeves, is it representing those that can't speak for themselves? And that's a real strong issue with me, because there's a lot of people, even during this time, that nobody speaks for them, and nobody speaks for the poor. Well, I'm gonna try to describe it, but it was undescribable. I couldn't tell you the feel. But walking into, because we were one of the first groups that got up closer to the stage, and everybody that came had a sign, and it said, "San Antonio's in the house, St. Louis is in the house, Baltimore's in the house." So everybody was announced, not from the stage, but from the other groups that were there. I thought that was it just kind of resonated with me. Like, this is so cool. So it brought that part of it. But, you know, saying that, it was so emotional, and it was so much love, you know, and I'm a church boy, so I know the Spirit was already there talking to me. You know, I'm kind of an economic guy. I believe in having your own business. I've always thought economically, if black folks had more of their own businesses, we would have less issue dealing with anybody, because we could spend our dollar in our own community. And even when we left there, I think on one of the interviews, we talked about this. And I want to see more entrepreneurship within our community. I want us to develop our own businesses. I want that and where we can do business and keep economics within our community. That's part of what I think that makes sense to me. I think one of the issues that plagued us was when we started letting government control the way we lived. And I think in the long run it affected us. I saw Doc Rivers say something, and it just really was interesting to me. And he almost broke down saying this. He said, "We love y'all, but y'all never loved us." Yeah. You know how strong that statement is? The Constitution was written by someone that had slaves and made white babies with black people. So I guess I say this to say, don't be a hypocrite. If you want us involved in your system, your business system, or any other system, don't have us knocking on your door asking you why you're only hiring 1% of black folks. Because you've already taken us out of the economic system, which not only affects who we are as men, but it affects our families because we do have to raise them. I guess the important thing for me right now is, and I'm loving this new movement, I'm loving the background of the new movement because it's just not black folks involved in it, it's other groups that's backing black folks, which is, and I'm sure more people will say this than Frank Dunn. But I think just the involvement of the folks that are behind the scenes, we got just as many whites in the protesters that you have blacks. But I think with this young group, this makes all the difference in the world. I think if we can help them, mentor them in any kind of way, and help push them on to what they need to do, that should be our job.
It was an unbelievable experience. Here's what happened to me. People had different reasons for going to the march. My reason for going to the march was atonement. Atonement. Being a Christian, I realized that Jesus atoned for our sins. He died on the cross and he suffered for our sins. But my atonement was for my sins, the things that I had did wrong, in the sense that I had a young son that was in elementary school, and I felt like I needed to be a better dad. I needed to be more involved. I needed to figure out some of the things that were my idiosyncrasies that got in the way. I needed to do some things in terms of family to kind of work out things with them so I could be a better man, a better person, and even doing things within the community, trying to figure out how can I be a better facilitator within community-related things. So I went to the march with that idea of trying my best through the information I got from Charles Shannon, Greg Jackson, about this place for atonement. Now, we could have atonement here within ourselves at home, but I think sometimes that message of atonement is so much better when you do it with a group of people, when you do it with 3, 4, 5. But if you did it with a million people for atonement, that seems to make it so that it's even better, and maybe it would stick better. Maybe it would be a thing that we could carry through for a longer period of time than we would do individually by ourselves. So I felt that the Million Man March was a great opportunity for my atonement and for me to stick to it. Now, there's a lot of negative things that come about where they said that women should have been there, children should have been there. But, I think that we as black men had problems and still have problems. And the problems were such that we have made decisions in terms of our relationship with our children to not be involved as FATHERHOOD, but become involvement in the sense of having FARTHERHOOD. We become extracted, difficult, or not really wanting to have relationships with the women that have our kids and with our children. That was part of the problems. We also had problems where 1 in every 4 black men had been in prison or in jail. We had to change. Women had made changes in their strides. They had gotten better jobs. They had education. They had a lot of things in their favor. But we as black men were falling behind. And I felt that the march was a call for us as black men to look at ourselves, how we were letting our people down, that we were letting ourselves, our family, our dreams down by being this person that didn't have all of what it takes. Maybe it's confidence or whatever it is, but that commitment to become better people for all of these particular reasons. And so I felt that the Million Man March, or this Day of Atonement, was an opportunity for all of us as men, to kind of get things together. And so it did that. And they did it in different ways of making this atonement right, this thing of making it special, because they had people up there to talk to us about ourselves. There was a woman that got there, and I forgot her last name. I remember her first name was Dorothy. She was the president of the coalition of black women. She got up there and talked about how women had gotten and had these strides in terms of economics and education, even in relationships and bringing up kids. But they felt that the black men had let them down in terms of the things that they had done. And so she said, I want you all to be better. I'm asking you to really work on this so that you can go out there and be better men for these women. There was Rosa Parks, who talked about her husband. Her husband was very supportive of her. He loved her, he said. He loved the community. And she said, you all as black men need to love those people that are close to you, and also to be involved with your family and your community as well. There was this black woman that came, that spoke. And it was interesting about this particular event or march because of the fact that this march, the Million Man March, or the Day of Atonement, was different roles for women because of the fact that Mahalia Jackson was the only woman that was a participant in the original March on Washington, which is a sadness. But this one had many women that got up there and talked to us. Then you had Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou got up there and read poetry to us. And she said that the situation was that we live in a world of where the storm is dark, where the pit is deep. But then she said that we need to, as black men, find ourselves within the midst of this storm, the darkness of this pit, some value within ourselves, that we need to pull ourselves up and rise to the occasion of being better men. Then what happens is there was this young guy, and his last name was Batiste. He was a 12-year-old kid from Chicago, honor roll student. Now he started the things off saying that you fathers, you grandfathers, you uncles, you cousins, and stuff like that, we need you. We need for you to step up to the plate. Because what happens is, at this point in time, you have not. And he began challenging us through his words that were so empowering that, everybody just felt like this guy had so much power to pull all of us up, to make us realize that we had failed. We had failed. And here's a youngster that was so bright, that brought to light what we needed to do. So I felt that this event, through these speakers, was great. I listened to Farrakhan talk, and he talked for over an hour, maybe an hour and a half. But the thing that impressed me at the march about Farrakhan at the very end was the pledge. We, as a million men, stood there and pledged that we would go back home and become better men. That we would not allow ourselves to sink into drugs and alcohol and all these other things that blocked us from achieving our dreams. That we would respect and love the mates that we have. And that we would spend time and effort with the development, not only economically, but spiritually with our children, and with working with the community to work and make those things better. And so we left that march feeling like we were more whole than what we did when we first got there. That we were better. We still have to change. We still have to change. You have to look at yourselves and figure out, what am I doing to make it so that I am a better man, not just by marching, not by just shouting, but how am I a better man? Am I a better man in a relationship? Am I a better man in terms of how I deal with my kids? Am I really a better man in terms of how I deal with other people under difficult or even pleasant circumstances? I want them to feel that, this is not a time period of just complaining. This is a time period of working, of really and truly looking at yourselves and looking at others and making it better. We went to the Million Man March and we were invigorated. And I think really and truly, if we look back at it and talk to the ones that are here in San Antonio and maybe the other ones that are in other places, that they probably went back home and were better men. That they were better men in their families. And they were better men in terms of some component of their community. But they did not, this whole emphasis, this whole panoramic change did not reach people that were necessarily outside of their household or outside of their neighborhood. Maybe they have to do things to be more of an imprint of things of change outside of their immediate environment. Maybe through legislation or some other things, but make a deeper imprint than what we did. Because I think that's important. And that's the only way that not only our families can change, but society can change in general.
My name is Wayman Griffin, and my purpose for attending the Million Man March was one saw it to be a very necessary experience in the life of not just the chapter from San Antonio, but black men all over the USA. Even more so, it was a unifying event, as far as I'm concerned, that impacted my life in very positive ways. To the much that it is still very intricately in my heart to be and to forever cherish that experience. It was electric, it was unbelievable. I've not experienced anything of that magnitude since then. I will tell you that we did not have to be coaxed into going. We did feel a necessary, a necessity, if you will, to find ourselves in that involved in that endeavor. But I will tell you, it was the most dynamic, electric thing I've ever seen, and it instilled in me the genuine belief that black folk are overcomers, we are leaders, we are movers and shakers, and we're the better today because of that event. Atonement, I guess it all depends on who you're asking. Oftentimes people will talk about atonement. My analogy of that is a sense of at-one-ment. If you spell it out, it actually sounds like an acronym, but it is very realistic. Atonement is an opportunity for any group or a body of individuals to come together as one. It's just that simple. And so as we were blessed to be a part of that wonderful and dynamic, life-altering, life-changing, life-empowering experience, we went away with a sense of unity. And if anybody has lived around black folk for any period of time, you know there are periods in the lives of any ethnic group for unity in their particular community. Well, I thought of it from a familial aspect more so than anything else. I, as a Christian father who aspires to be the best father I can be, the best husband I can be to my wife, and certainly to encourage my children to be a part of corporate interactive periods such as this, that are powerful, that are pure, that are of good report. So it was a great opportunity for me to do that, understanding with a growing family at that particular time. They were in a younger stage, and you know, we can only do better when we know better. And so when we're part of those better endeavors that are life-altering, life-enriching, then certainly it builds the foundation, if you will, for that type of growth and leadership. Well, there have been numerous. The most momentous is the fact that we've had an African American working and running the nation from the White House. And even as we speak, history looks like we're about to make another major accomplishment and have the first African American sister to be the vice presidential. She's already the nominee, and we believe that if we get out and do our part, she will indeed inhabit a spot in the White House in the months to come. Have a few things, one of which I want to show you. The local San Antonio newspaper called home the day before the day of the march, and my wife informed me that San Antonio made the front page newspaper here in San Antonio. For black folks, the only way we generally got that, we had to be doing something that was unacceptable, but here we are starting a new chapter, and I thought it was a great way for us to start. You can see the little caption picture, and there are others. Also, aside from that news, because that was the national news and what they wanted to depict, but also as an African American publisher of this publication, Our Heritage was a story, a publication that celebrated African American accomplishment. Then we were beneficial to do that, and we do have validation there on the back. You see the masses of African American men from around the country who are gathered. And ultimately, my greatest passion for the publishing business was the privilege, and is a privilege even now, to be the publisher of the Snap News, San Antonio's one of the oldest publications here for African Americans, and to follow in the footsteps of one Eugene Coleman, who was a mover and a shaker in the community and was involved in the political aspects and all. And we learned a lot from that. There were things that we learned about the media business. On that day, we couldn't just waltz up in there and get a press pass or credentials. So they had us go to the Coliseum. We sat down and had that experience. It helped me to grow even more in the business of publication and what is required when you start doing things on a national level. Most importantly, one of the things I want to say is because people tried to discredit what was being said, because they were saying here was a guy who was spewing hate and this and that. What he was doing was empowering African American men to straighten up, stand up, and to go back home better, with a commitment in our hearts to do better in our community and in our households. And so most of us did not perceive it as a religious, indifferent event. We saw it as a time of cohesion, because again, remember, the word was atonement, but we really meant at one. And so consequently, I believe we're better today. Ultimately, what I want to say as well is that I think because of what was done and what was shared and how we were inspired, today Black Lives Matter really does matter. It's relevant because of the Million Man March. So it's a very foundational experience, and I think we're better for that. And I think the sky's the limit for black folk now. And we don't want to come and say this is a black movement. This is an American movement, and we're going to make a difference in our day and time.
Edrick Hardeman is my name. Oh, my experiences with the Million Man March was, it's kind of hard to put in words for me. Living here in San Antonio, Texas, seeing a lot of things that's gone on up to my adulthood, it was an opportunity to do something that a lot of people would have liked to have done, but weren't able to because of finances or whatever circumstances that they may be involved in. But for me, it was a challenge to who I am as a person, the things that I look at as far as economics, the opportunities for African Americans to do things that would make their lives better. The things that touched my heart when I initially got there, we went to the convention center, and we had an opportunity to see a lot of celebrities, Al Sharpton, Bertram Lee. We went to an event on that evening that took place, and the most astonishing thing that I saw was all of these black men coming together in this one auditorium, and they had this one group from Florida they had like about 30, 40 men with them, and they all had on the same jumpsuits. And they walked from one end of the auditorium to the other. I mean, it was so impressive. It was like they were in the military, but they weren't. They were just brothers that had come together and decided to make this venture to Washington, D.C., just like we did from San Antonio. I was proud of San Antonio because there was over 60 brothers, to my knowledge, that was actually there. We didn't all come together, but there were some that drove to Washington, D.C., as well as those of us that caught a plane and went there. Yeah, that was interesting. We had Mr. TC got us up early, and we started to march down the avenue, and TC would always say things like, you know, San Antonio in the house or whatever, so to motivate, because he's that type of person. And as we worked our way all the way up to the front, and we were at the front, the only thing that kept us from getting to the area where Farrakhan and all was these barriers and these large speakers that were set up in order for everybody to be able to hear it. Well, I was right there at the cubicles that you couldn't go past the barriers. I was right there with some young men from California, 2 young men. One was 26, the other one was 24. And while we were waiting, because we waited a long time before anything really got off, it started entertainment, people singing, dancing, and so forth and so on. But while I was in this one spot, just my 10.5 inches of foot in one spot for 12.5 hours, because there was too many people behind us for us to be able to move. So from that point on, these 2 young men that I had an opportunity to communicate with were both from Los Angeles, California. And when Farrakhan finally came out and started to speak, these guys started to cry. And so I asked one of them, "Why are you crying?" And he said that he's crying because of the things that he had done. And he said he had murdered 2 guys because he was in a gang. And he just cried. I mean, the young man just broke down and cried for the longest. The other gentleman that was with us also mentioned what he had done. So they were there to atone for the things that they had done, because before they left, they had acknowledged to the families of the people that they had killed that they were sorry for what they had done. But amazing enough, they weren't charged for anything, so that was kind of confusing now on that era. But the fact that there were so many young men there that atoned for things that they had done, whether they were in a gang, they weren't in a gang. For me, personally, I looked at myself as one that wanted to try and do some things differently. I made some mistakes in my life, but the atonement that I wanted to make was basically to myself. The things that I denied myself of because I just chose the wrong path. And by going to Washington, D.C. and experiencing a speech from a man that was just amazing. I had no desire for food, water, or drink. Didn't have to go to the restroom or anything for 12.5 hours. And so to me, that was God in the mix. So regardless of what some people thought about Farrakhan being a Muslim, me being a Christian and all of that was just pushed to the wayside. I did not consider that at all. I went to hear the word. And the motivation that he put to us was such to where I couldn't wait to get back home to do some things. Me being in business for myself, I wanted to see how many young people that I could get to consider college is great. College is not for everybody. But if you can get a vocation, or if you can go and learn to be an insurance agent, be an investor, some of these things like being an electrician, or you can go to vocational schools. You don't have to go to a major college to accomplish what your desires are. And my desire is to be what I am, electrical contractor. And I love it, and I share it with anybody, and I try to recruit every chance I get. But my thing that I came here really to do was to try and get young people to understand that you make your own choices. You have an opportunity in life to do something different. You have an opportunity to see some things that are not right, and you know what path you're trying to take. And always keep God first. That's kind of hard for a young person to do because I went through it, and I grew up in the church. But peer pressure has its way of directing you in a way that you should not go. So you have to make those mistakes in order to be able to correct yourself. And by doing this in Washington, D.C., this atonement to forgive yourself, as well as also helping people to understand that life is short and you really need to consider doing some things that's positive in your life. The advice I would give to America at this time is, it's a real time for everybody. The pandemic is one thing, but that's something that nobody controls. But the state of the union right now is totally confusing to a lot of people. On Facebook, I read the other day, a young lady asked, why does America hate us so much? And it really brought tears to my eyes, because at the end of the day, with all we've gone through, even the guys that are in front of me right now, we've all gone through some things that wasn't right and we didn't deserve them. So for young people now, I would tell them, be the best that you can be from a positive note, and understand that you have to work with people, but know what your talents are and follow your dream. And whatever you do, your vision is your vision. It's not something that somebody gives you. That vision is what's in your heart, what's in your mind, and if you go about it in the right way, you succeed in life.
Hello, I'm Pastor Edrick L. Jennings of the God House of Restoration Church. When I got the word that we were going to go to Washington, D.C., I was elated, I was flabbergasted, I was happy that black men would come together and go to Washington, D.C. to be heard. I believe it was a calling that God had called all people to, of different minorities to come together, but especially for the black man. So I wanted to go. My family, my wife, she approved it and everything, so I definitely got on the bandwagon. At the time, I was electrified. I saw people, and I had been in the military, and by me being there at that time, it was like an old reunion going on for black men to get together, because they didn't think we could get together without having a riot or have some other problem that we had had. So I was very happy and able to attend, seeing brothers from different places of the world getting together and acknowledging one another in the spirit of brotherlyhood. So I appreciated that, you know. That's why I was happy about that, you know, definitely. The words cannot express what you felt. It was a feeling that, you know what I mean, you can't relive it. You have to been there to experience the beautiful camaraderie that we had with one another. We were all together on one accord. I was just so happy that we could see that brothers get together and to be recognized as doing something for America as a whole. So it was a wonderful experience that I cannot explain. The words cannot give me the proper way to say it. Amen. Well, back then we had made a pledge to go back to our communities, to get involved in getting our people together and started being recognized as a people. And we were on fire, because, you know, being around those people of different nations and of different races and different religions, when we got together, it was like a pledge. It was like God calling all people together to make amends of what we needed to do when we get back to the community, because our community was in rambles. Our community needed some effort on what we needed to do to make a stand for our young men. And so we were on fire to go back and try to help the community to do what was going on. My commitment was, I worked in the school district, and when I got back, I was letting them know that I was in the Million Man's March. I was proud of that. We had controversy at this time. It was some ministers stating that we don't need to be there because of the Muslim nation that was calling this meeting. But I stood up and said, God has no respect of person. So we stood up and we let them know we came together as a people, not as, you know what I mean, a nation of Islam, you know what I mean? And I was very proud to tell the young kids, you have to do something. You have to be accountable. Don't believe that, you know, you can only be this type of person. Believe who you can be by relating on what we can help you with, you know. So I try to put and inspire these young men, you can do better than what you're doing. You don't have to be a rapper. You don't have to be a dope dealer. You can be who God wants you to be. And that's what we try to do. My message today is that we need to reach back and pass the baton on to let these black young men, we've come too far to drop where we are now. And we need to let them realize that, you know what I mean, we have made this march to let other folks know if it had not been for our forefathers, if it had not been for us going to this march, that we cannot forget about where we came from and where we're going now. And for some reason that I have a feeling that we have slipped a little bit. And we need to get back and let these people know that it's not time to let go. It's time to press on and move on, you know, and to let these people know that they have to be able to do what God asked them to do. You know what I'm saying? You know, we have to pass the baton to the children. And like, if we don't do that, we're lost.